Hello, everybody. I hope we have a number of you joining us by now. It's 7:01 Australian Eastern Standard Time, and I'd just like to wish everybody a very, very warm welcome wherever you are, whether you're in Australia or in the world somewhere. But we'd like to really welcome you. And I'm the chairperson of scholarships at the International College of Management Sydney, ICMS, and the foundation that we have here, and very involved in the Independent Higher Education Australia peak body as well. I'm very, very excited tonight because we have a very special guest star with us who I think you can see us both. I hope you can all see us both and hear us both. I'm very delighted and honoured to introduce Mr. Chris Watney. Christopher Watney is the boutique director of the House of Dior, and he's also the ambassador to the Bachelor of Business, Fashion and Global Brand Management at ICMS. We're very delighted to talk to you tonight. And welcome you to this incredible occasion. I'm actually in my office in Manly at ICMS, and this is where I work. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Anne. It's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight, or this morning as it is in the UK. So it's just got 8 o'clock in the morning in the UK, and I know there's people joining us from all around the globe. So it's amazing to have so many people part of this. And you're right, Anne, I think it was almost 10 years ago to the day that we first met in London.
Absolutely.
So,
yes. And it was around about this time because I was doing Christmas shopping and I suppose, yes. So, and I remember meeting you in your role as general manager. I didn't know that you were general manager at the time. You literally were looking after me, and I had my then 20-year-old son with me. But yes, it was a very nice to meet you then, and interesting that you've become friends with our family ever since. So it's wonderful, and now an ambassador to the bachelor degree in fashion and global brand manager. So thank you for being here. I think it's probably 8:04 a.m. or something there.
Indeed, it is. Yeah, nice and early still.
And I love your background in New Bond Street.
Yeah, so unfortunately it's just a virtual background. I'm not standing outside the store, but wanted to show a little bit about the House of Dior. We can't be outside it today. It's freezing cold, and so at least you can see a little bit of it.
Indeed, I mean we are in this unusual world at the moment, so here we are, and we've made the best of it this 2020, and let's hope for a good 2021. Let me talk to you about your career a bit, Chris. People will want to know. So tell me, firstly, if you wouldn't mind, you are boutique director of House of Dior. I've had the pleasure of going into that beautiful, beautiful House of Dior in New Bond Street, London. How did you get into luxury in retail?
Sure. Sure. Well, I actually didn't start in luxury. I've been in retail now for it's my 21st year, I believe, in retail management. And I actually started in department store retail in Alders Department Store Group and House of Fraser, which I guess the equivalent in Australian is someone like David Jones. For those of you who may not be familiar with House of Fraser Group. So I started in department store retail, and then I really there was a point where I wanted to move into luxury, and I actually joined Harrods as business manager for Harrods, dealing with obviously luxury goods and identifying, understanding the luxury consumer. And then, as you referenced, Anne, we met 10 years ago when I was general manager for Ralph Lauren, and then I've been fortunate enough to be part of Christian Dior Couture for the last 5 years.
So if I take you back to that beginning, because it's an interesting career journey that you've had. You're much younger than I am, and I know that to get to where you are today is a great accomplishment. But I know that you've had a very hard working and interesting time and experiences. If you go back to where you started out, I think maybe at one point, I don't know, you mentioned to me you might have been a teenager, but can you talk a bit about that? And was there a particular moment where you realized what your passion and dream might become or was?
Sure. Well, when I started out, I started out as a management trainee, straight to education, and really, if I'm very honest, at the time, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do with my life. I've always had an interest in finance, particularly in the stock market, and I thought maybe that's a route I would go. But I did this as to gain some management experience as a management trainee in retail. It's sort of like it just happened. It wasn't necessarily something planned, but I really enjoyed it, and I think having originally thought I would do it for 9 months, get some. I was actually doing an MBQ at the same time through my workplace while working, so I was getting an education and also working at the same time. But I loved the teamwork, and I loved the change that happens in retail every day, and how much you can get involved, and how much difference you can make, and whether that is, whether it's as a salesperson, and as you said, the interaction I had with you 10 years ago and your son, actually that made a difference to your day. And as a salesperson, we can do that. And also, then when you go into, you go up the ladder and you get into management roles and to leadership roles, actually the difference you can make on the business, on impact on the P&L, etc. But for me, there was a moment when I was working as project manager for House of Fraser, and it was the Westfield development. We were building a new store, new Westfield opening in White City, London. And I was fortunate enough to be the project manager for that. And I was dealing with luxury brands, and I was supporting them doing their shop fits, arranging when they could fit, when they needed to be in by, out by, ready for the critical path so that we could open. And what I loved about dealing with brands like Chanel and Yves Saint Laurent and Anya Hindmarch, Moschino, Dior, was the passion that they had for their brand. And it was very different, because I think actually in department store retail, it was very commercial and quite transactional. But actually, when you're speaking to these brand partners, and you're speaking to the area directors and the different people in that brand, it's the passion they had for their brand which really resonated with me. And I suddenly thought to myself, there's something there that I quite like.
Yes. And so, was there a particular moment? Was there a conversation or a brand in particular that made that stands out to you where that penny dropped?
Yeah, it was actually. Do you know what it was? Within the House of Fraser, we were dealing with hundreds of different brands, and I think what the penny dropped when I was dealing with the luxury brands, the high end brands, and I suddenly. It's probably, after dealing with, 8-9 years of a multitude of brands, but actually because this was a brand new development, a brand new store, we were trying to really push the higher end brands. And it was sometimes the first time that we'd had a Yves Saint Laurent corner and a Hindmarch corner ever in the group at the time. And when you're dealing with those brands and you're like, wow, actually the focus they have on their product, how much they care. And it's not just about how much money they can take. It's actually about the image of the brand and protecting the brand. And I felt that really resonated with me. And that's why I then decided to take a move when I was offered a role to be business manager in Harrods. I wanted to deal with luxury goods. Harrods is a department store, so it was close enough to what I was dealing with, because it wasn't, it was a change from moving from mid-market department store into luxury department store. So the change was relatively seamless. But also, I think in Harrods, it allowed me to really identify and understand and relate to that luxury client, which, you'll know from visiting London quite a bit. They're lucky to have in Harrods. It's, the best brands represented there.
Yes. And I think it's difficult in some respects in Australia. There is really, in my opinion, no real equivalent to Harrods. It's an iconic and amazing. It's an amazing place. It's almost like a village in a building, and a high end one at that. One of those ones you need to go into with a lot of time, and I think, you know, or with an absolute end game in mind. I go back to when you were talking about when we met in Ralph Lauren, and the way in which you know, I didn't know that you were the general manager at the time, which I said, and it wasn't until you handed me your business card that I looked at it and I thought, goodness me, I've just met the general manager of this incredible store in New Bond Street in London. I would have had no idea that you were the general manager due to your ability to relate, incredible humility, and I know my son kept on pulling out beautiful garments and thinking that they would look really nice on him, and you managed that really very well for me because I was not about to spend money on him in there. So I think of that fondly, and I also think that relational stance is something that is very important in what you've done over the years.
I think you're right, Anne. I think when we talk about when I talked about the passion that I discovered being project manager for House of Fraser, actually it's also the passion for clients. And I think anyone who works in luxury retail or wants to work in luxury retail, you have to have that passion. And the fact that, you know, I want to spend more time on the floor. And when we met 10 years ago, you know, I was on the floor. I didn't introduce myself with a title. I just introduced myself with my name. Because for me, title was irrelevant. What you need to know is that, you know, you're going to get great service, whatever the title is, from the person looking after you. And also, I think, you know, again, we joke about it, but, you know, very early on, I could read that you just stepped off a plane and you'd had a long flight, and what you wanted to do was you had a very short time to get Christmas presents for your husband. Yeah. And having a 20-year-old son wanting to buy the whole store was not your objective. So I needed to ensure that, you know, I supported your need to getting your husband quite a few Christmas presents in the end, if I remember. And then, but I think we also managed to get a few bits for your son. I don't think we left him empty-handed, did we?
No. And I think it's really, really nice because my husband continues to enjoy things even today from that Christmas. So that was fantastic. And I kind of actually got an experience at that point when you did hand me a business card, and I'd wandered around that beautiful Ralph Lauren store and just seen the people that were working in there. And I came away thinking, is Chris their boss? And I really, it was a very good and interesting experience for me to see someone with the humility and the relatability that you were able to demonstrate. I just want to take you back to that pivotal moment, and you're in the House of Fraser, and the House of Fraser have just started to bring in the luxury goods, and you had this penny drop and you ended up at Harrods. Can you tell us a little bit more about differences and your experience there?
Yeah, sure. I think what you found in mid-market department store retail is you're really managing the commercial aspect, but you're not necessarily giving the brands the attention that they deserve, because I think you look at it more as a commercial entity. What I loved about joining Harrods is actually the detail you could get into the brands. Even though I was fortunate enough to be looking after about 30 different brands when I joined Harrods. You're able to get into a little bit more detail. You're able to identify with brands a bit more, and you're meeting really passionate, caring, people, whether it be the managing director of the brand or the area director or whatever it be. Actually, they're very passionate about everything they do. They also want to know who the client is. They want to understand a little bit more about that so that they can develop their brand. And you mentioned with Harrods, Harrods is 1 million square foot of selling space. At peak time, they employ about 6,000 staff. It's bigger than a village. It's really something quite impressive. And it has every single brand, luxury brand in the world there. It doesn't have any mid-market or really enterprise brands there. So what you're dealing with is you're dealing with a clientele who understands that. And you're also very aspirational. You have people coming in just to walk around because actually they aspire to be shopping some of that. I think then when you ask that question, the reason I wanted to move over to Ralph Lauren, and I was fortunate enough to get offered the general manager role for Ralph Lauren, and the real pivotal point for me in making that decision was that I loved working in Harrods and I loved working with the luxury brands, but even that you could get into more detail, you were still managing 30 different brands. And what I really, really wanted to do was to try and get into a brand that I had an affinity with. And that Ralph was something I remember very early photographs where I'd be wearing a Ralph polo or Ralph cords or whatever it be. And actually it's a brand which
I remember cords.
Well, I had a feeling you were going to bring up the cords, but let's not go on to that one because it was a typical Ralph look. It's very good for this time of year in the UK. But,
and I think it was like a herringbone or maybe a plaid, beautiful sports jacket, blazer.
It was a herringbone sports jacket, probably some sort of stripy Ralph shirt and a pair of cords. Please, that made an impact. But what I was able to do by joining Ralph Lauren is that you've got your focus is solely on one brand, and you can truly get to understand the brand, and you can go in far more detail, whether that be into the history of the brand and how it's become where it is today, or whether it's actually getting into the exact product detail. So, product by product and really understanding that. And then once you've got that knowledge, you can really then truly understand your client. And I believe that working then for a monobrand, for one brand, you actually can get more into clienteling. And so that's, really where we started the conversation where we met 10 years ago. Actually, I got to know you and we built a good relationship and with your family as well, where 10 years later we're still we're still in touch, we're friends. So that's the one wonderful thing I think about luxury, is where you can develop true relationships, business relationships, and also friendships.
Yes, I'm still hoping for the day that I can come into Dior and be as adventurous as I was the day that I was in Ralph Lauren. It's a slightly different, what should I say, level. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It's interesting when you talk about the commercial entity of a place, but then the other elements that you bring into the commercial entity, because the commercial entity is one thing. And of course, brands have to be somewhat, I suppose, there's a complexity with brands, and they have to be somewhat thoughtful and mindful around the commerciality behind brands. And is it all about the revenue or in this kind of balance, and also understanding clients as well is another complexity in that whole mix. I know that you've been in Harrods now on 2 separate occasions, Chris. Yes.
It's true. So I was fortunate enough to join Dior 5 years ago, and the first placement they gave me was actually to manage the Dior accounts in Harrods. So they're called concessions.
Right.
So this.
Good. So that was where I was leading. So I have a question for you about that. But do you want to just talk a bit about that particular role before I put a question? Thank you.
Certainly. So joining, originally in 2010, I think I worked for Harrods, and looked after 30 odd brands as business manager. Then when I rejoined, I worked for Dior, but I was in Harrods looking after the Dior account. So there was 7 concessions of Dior. So for example, menswear, fine jewellery, women's ready-to-wear, shoes, accessories, baby Dior, etc. So all on different locations throughout the huge landscape of Harrods.
Amazing. I have a question for you, and the thing I remember us chatting about is, I think when you were in your first days, you told me a story. And I think you'd only been there for a short while. It was at the beginning. And it was to do with some sunglasses that were amazing, and they were quite popular. And do you recall this?
I think I recall this one. Was this?
Well, I think it's an interesting message about commerciality versus and what I was leading to earlier. I'd love you to share. I'm sure.
Sure. Yeah. I think that very early on, probably first few days, I was getting very excited by telling my GM, my general manager, about how many pairs of this particular sunglasses sold that morning. And I think it was, I can't remember exact figures, about 72, 73
you
pairs.
Ordered more even, I'm not sure.
I had, and I'd phoned up the buying team in Paris and ordered another 200 pairs because, they were really hot, and, we could sell them, quicker than they could deliver them. And he gave me a very good lesson, which was about actually balancing commerciality with image. And it's something which I talk to my team about the whole time now. And you don't want, when you're dealing with a luxury brand, and whether it be Dior or Chanel or Hermes or whoever it be, what you don't want to do is you don't want every single person to be wearing the same piece.
You don't want to stop the order, didn't he?
I did. Yeah, so I didn't get those extra 200 pairs that I'd ordered. But I think what happens is that you need to balance the commerciality with the image at all times, and the image of the brand is what makes the brand strong today, as it for Dior, as it was 73, nearly 74 years ago. And I think that's an important lesson that I learned in luxury very, very early on. About how to balance commerciality with the image,
which is that's an incredible nuance and detail. I've been in business most of all of my adult life, and you look after the top line, and when you look after the top line, if you're selling the sunglasses, you keep selling the sunglasses because that is going to look after the bottom line. And what's interesting is the preservation of the brand and the beauty. There's a beauty in that, actually. There's, it creates a something special, and people can appreciate things that little bit more. So that is an interesting lesson. It must have been a bit of that. That's another penny drop, I bet.
Absolutely, and very different, I guess, from my first 10 years in my career, where you'd be liaising with the buying team if something was selling well, and you'd just be ordering more and more and more until you sold out. And it was very much all about that commercial. So no, it's a very, very, very interesting lesson, and something which I now very quickly fully understood and now share with my team. Yes.
I just want to take you back quickly before I go to sort of bring you into the current where you are today and the work you're doing now. You're at Ralph Lauren for a while. I think that's a family business still, and that must have been fascinating to work for one family. You talked about insignia, which is interesting. We talk about global brands, in particular in this degree that we have at ICMS, and Ralph Lauren's insignia. It's such the polo and working for the one family. I can imagine that must have been a fascinating and very enlightening time.
It was fantastic, and actually in my time there I really got to know the Lauren family very well, from Ralph Lauren and his wife Ricky, and also their sons as well. I was fortunate enough to meet them on several occasions, being general manager of the European flagship. I had frequent visits from the family, I even remember, and I don't think I've ever shared this with you, so I probably need to dig out the photo, but I actually did an advertising campaign with them. I was invited along just to see how the whole advertising and marketing shoot was going, and Ralph's son was the face of Ralph, and so him and I were having a coffee before the shoot, and we had this really old vintage car, and he said to me, "Oh look," he said, the actor who's meant to be the driver, he's taking ages. He said, "Look," he said, "let's just jump in the car and just mess around." So we were doing this. So I put on the flat cap of the driver, put on the sunglasses of the driver, and everything. then the press team started shooting it, started taking all these photos, and I'm sort of saying to him, I turned around to him, I said, I think we need to just stop this now. We need to wait for the action. He went, no, this is cool. Let's do it. Anyway, so this was just fun. And then when the the actor and the male model appeared, obviously I jumped out and I stood back and watched everything. They actually sent the photos through to Ralph Lauren, and he loved the one where I was messing around with his son as the driver, because he said it was just so natural. And they actually had that in Times Square, on the billboards up in Times Square, as one of the big advertising campaigns. So it's not the most flattering photo, but it's what I will share with you at some point, Anne.
That's wonderful. That should be, that's a great posterity. I think that's a fabulous story. It's good to hear, though, for a brand to have evolved to the level at which it has. It's so global and so enormous, and there's such family involvement still to this day. So you must have had, just on the quiet. I know we've got a bit of an audience out there. We can't see them; they can see us. So I'm not sure how many there's. I know there's a few hundred, but more. But I think we can we know? Did you meet any really interesting celebrities or anything when you were there, or are you not allowed to say?
I did, and in Ralph, I mean, I probably shouldn't mention names, especially as this is being recorded. But there are certain UK celebrities who are often wearing Ralph at places like Wimbledon, so I was very fortunate enough to be able to work with them, to be able to look after them, and and understand a little bit more about them. So it was great, and I think what you do when you work in luxury retail is you do get to meet a good degree of celebrities, but also very high net worth individuals, and some of them very secretive as well. And it's important to maintain that that level of respect, that you don't, and as much as I'd love to share with you who I've met, I don't think I will on this occasion.
It's really nice, and I appreciate that. I respect that too, and it's really nice that you again talk about understanding the people that you're working with, and again that comes back to that relationship building and understand. I think that's an enormous part of what you do, and it comes with experience, and I guess it brings me to where you are now, where you are today. It's an incredible, I can only imagine the sort of interesting people that you get to work with, as well as the clients that you get to work with, together with the corporate side. So as boutique director, House of Dior, London, and I know you frequent Paris and fashion shows, etc. What does day-to-day look like for you?
Sure, it's a good question. I think the day-to-day has changed a little in the last year. Because of global pandemic, I've not spent pretty much any time in Paris since February. Whereas I would be actually I wouldn't be able to be here today if there was no global pandemic, because I'd be in Paris with the fall buying.
There are some upsides.
Exactly. But I think for what's the role entail, I think the best way to look at this is it's a strategical role that I do, and it's a strategical role to develop the House of Dior in all aspects. So whether that be from profit and financial management, and ensuring that I achieve the targets that I've committed to, but I think before even you look at that, for me it's about getting the right structure and organisation in the House of Dior. It's the store. It's a beautiful 4-floor, huge maison, with all of the Dior universities, all of the Dior categories. So to be able to run that sort of machine, you've got to have the right structure, you've got to have the right organisation, you've got to have the right people. You've got to ensure that all the operational side and the administration side is set up so that it allows the selling team to focus on service, so that we can really support the needs and develop our top clients whether it be through customer relations, through customer management, through events. And I think then it's it's working alongside the press and marketing team to ensure that the Dior marketing campaigns are then realized within boutique. We talked about the buying sessions, so it's about ensuring that we have the right product for our marketplace, for our clients, because again, especially now, the world's changed a lot. London used to be full of international visitors because there's very little travel at the moment. It's a local residential client, and actually that has an impact on the assortment and the buy. So the product now, we need to ensure that we're buying for that local resident client. We also need to get to know them more than ever, because we're not fortunate enough to have our Middle Eastern friends come during the summer, and then again in the winter we're not having our Chinese and Asian visitors like we used to have. We're not having the European visitors who would come over to London for Christmas shopping. So it's become far more reliant on the local domestic client, and our buying and everything we do has to reflect that. So, but the role for me is to create a vision for the House of Dior, and then to create a strategy, a long-term strategy, which I put in place as a 5-year strategy. And then it's adapting the strategy to the short term. And I think this year's become probably more prevalent than ever, where actually the adaptability has been needed more than ever.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. How have your team coped?
Do you know what? They've coped very well. I think it's been a year which I like to look in my career. When we face challenges, I always try and relate it back to something I've experienced previously, and which I think a lot of people, when you've been in an industry for a long time, when you face a new challenge, there's normally something in my 21 year career that I can refer back to and take reference from, and maybe look at what I did it work, or maybe it didn't work, what could I do differently? Yep. This is something completely new, so we've never had this type of situation before, so we had to adapt, we had to be agile, and we had to deal with change, and as the whole world did. To close the boutique in March for 3 months, and then again to close it in November for a whole month. So to trade the year, missing 4 months of the year, was something none of us could have predicted at the start of this year. And when I talk about the long-term strategy, actually, that was never in the long-term strategy. I'd never got a contingency. What happens if we have to close the boutique for 4 months? Because that was unprecedented. And yes. I don't believe, apart from probably in wartime, I don't believe there to be a period since the First and Second World War where businesses have had to close like that.
Yes, I agree. It's obviously a testimony to your team and to you where you are today. Before I had a couple of questions here that I want to go on to next, but I just want to ask something else. What do you look for when you're recruiting, when you're looking at something new to bring into the team, and talk about that if you would.
It's interesting, actually. I think and this is more of a personal rather than a brand focus. I'm not as interested in the CV as most people. Of course I will read the CV. But what I really like to do is to get to know that person. And when I'm sitting in front of someone which I'm interviewing, I really ask myself 2 questions. And the first one is, can I relate to this person? And will our clients relate to this person? So, and there's a lot, it's not as simple as I'm making it sound. They need to be, to have that, you actually need to have a high IQ is good, but high emotional intelligence counts for a lot. They need to be able to read and adapt to situations. They need to be able to be agile. They need to be dynamic. And they need to be someone who, if I can't relate to this person, is my client going to relate to this person? Are the rest of the team going to be able to relate to this person? And when you talk about, how do the team cope, the team, when times, there's changing times, the team pull together more than ever. because they need each other, they need to support each other, and they want to support each other. And if you've got someone who everyone in the team can relate to, it makes it much easier. The other thing is, we represent for me, the most luxurious brand in the world. And so actually we need to be elegant in everything that we do, in our communication to the client, in the way that we do everything. And so, what do I look for? I look for people with passion, who genuinely want to, work in a brand that they love. And I look for people who can, who are relatable, who can understand our clients, and our clients will be able to understand them. So I don't look for someone who's necessarily been the top seller in a competitive brand, or have got, an amazing CV. That helps, but actually it's only if they can, if they can be able to have a 20-minute conversation with me about something that's not to do with work. So, and I'll always ask questions, tell me something that's not on your CV, because, everything else is scripted. You can ask an interview, anyone can, have an amazing interview by scripting a CV, but actually, if they can talk to me about one of their passions, whether it be art or it be wine or it be, I don't know, whatever it be, for 20 minutes, and they can entertain me, then they'll be able to entertain our clients.
Oh, sure. You know me too well. Yes. No, I think that's that's a very, very wonderful piece of advice. I hope that people that are watching and listening were glued to that, because that's a brilliant piece of advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And I guess you've built up this incredible team there. And how long have you been there now, Chris?
So I'm just coming into my 4th year as director for the House of Dior. It's flown by. It's flown by.
Extraordinary. I remember when it was the first time. And so leading the team. Talk to us, if you would, about leadership. You've had this incredible journey, and you've House of Fraser, Harrods, Ralph Lauren, Dior, Harrods, and now the boutique director Dior. Going to Paris. It sounds romantic. It sounds incredible, and talk to us about that leadership and those ethics that you that are important to you.
Yeah, I again, it's my own style. I think when you see me as a client, or you see me as a team member, part of my team, or part of a senior team, people, for me, when I lead, I'm natural. I like people to see me. I don't necessarily need to share them every single thing about my personal life, but I like them to see me. So you shouldn't see a different me in work or outside of work. I think the other thing which I learned very early on was one of my mentors said to me, to treat people as you would like to be treated. And I think there's a misconception when you go into management and leadership, which is that you're the boss, you have to rule by fear, or you can only gain respect through different means. Actually, I think, and it's something which we talked about, 10 years ago when I introduced myself. I didn't talk to you about title. The title is irrelevant. You would work out whether you're, a client or you're one of my team. You will know through the way that I act and I carry myself what my role is, without actually me ever needing to mention it. The other point for me is within leadership is honesty, and honesty works both ways. I think there's honesty in terms of telling the team really as much as you can. So I think there's transparency there, but also honesty, I think, is when people are not necessarily performing, or they're not doing as well as they can. Having that honest conversation with them really does help. If you want to build a strong and a loyal team, I think then actually having two-way conversation, being able to have an honest conversation, and also being super approachable. So, I'm lucky. I've got a team. Total number of people who work in the boutique is around 100 people. Now, okay, I've developed the vision and the strategy, but I don't know the answer to everything, and I don't have all the ideas. So actually being open to ideas and making sure it is two-way, so that if people have got ideas, that they can bring it to the table. I've got an amazing, dynamic, entrepreneurial group of people that I work with every day. from all around the world. And I need to use those. I mean, they're all super bright, super educated people. And I think for me, it's actually, we need to utilize that. And it's not saying, my way is the only way. Actually, I get given a role because I take on probably more accountability than anyone else there. But actually, it doesn't mean that I will always have all the ideas. And a lot of the best ideas actually come from the team. And maybe they spend more time on the floor in their area of the business than I do. And so they're the experts in that. The other thing in leadership for me is I've always been fortunate enough to find a mentor in every brand that I've worked for. Whether it's a formal mentor or an informal mentor, sometimes they don't even realize they're a mentor. But actually, I've learned from that person. And, I find people that sometimes, you have a challenge or something and you just want to run a second opinion off people and to build a network as well. So next door to you, may be able to, I'm not sure if you can see on the image behind me, but next door to me is a brand called Chanel, who, it could be seen as a competitor, but actually you've heard of it, okay. I'm sure you've been in there, Anne. So, but actually within Chanel, my relationship with their boutique director is amazing. And actually we use each other for different ideas. We don't necessarily share company secrets, but, if I have a situation I'm not sure how to deal with, actually, I can't always ask my team who report into you. So you don't always want to ask your boss. So sometimes actually it's good to have that network. So you call upon one of the other boutique directors and you say, hey, look, this is something I've got a challenge with. Have you ever dealt with this before? Any advice? And so, to work with people like that is amazing. Going on to leadership again, though, I think, for me, it's about, you always, everything you do, the team see, they respond to. So when times are tough, if you show stress or you show you show frustration, the team pick up on that. And so for me, it's about actually always having a positive, a can-do attitude, and treating it like it's your own business. So, I'm so passionate about my business that, you would be mistaken for thinking it's not actually mine. So, whether that's making do it if I completely own that. The other thing I've done in terms of leadership is actually there's some amazing books on leadership, and I've from starting from 20 years ago, I try to read now and again different books of different leaders, and that's always given me a bit of inspiration of some of the most successful people, how they lead, and sometimes even when they're not related to your place of work. I read a book recently on Disney, which was really interesting, and about the principles of leadership. And actually, I could then relate that because the principles of leadership don't change.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Chris. Thank you so much for sharing such a wealth of knowledge from your hard work over the years, and such a great ethic towards that. And I imagine it's a fairly, I know I don't want to take up too much time. I have just two more sort of formal questions, but I just wanted to quickly say, it's a high demand role, and I guess you need to stay tuned in yourself and fit. How do you do that?
Oh, I mean, for me, it is high pressure, high demand sometimes. But I actually, I think there's two important things. One is to have a work-life balance. And for me, I enjoy running. And I think actually, Anne, you may have got me interested in the running bug. And so, where for me, that, it's important to stay fit and healthy. And I use my 45-minute run in the morning actually to, sometimes I think about nothing. I completely clear my mind. Yes. Other times actually I take a work problem, and because I'm running through the countryside, actually the work problem isn't a problem. It's just, I've got 45 minutes to come up with an answer or something like that. Yeah. So I think that's also important. The other thing is actually to ensure that, you don't burn out, is to recognize when you're working crazy hard. And there are times where you will have to work 80 hours a week. That happens. Yeah. But it's important actually that we manage our time. and we manage our, I guess we look after our mental health by knowing when we need to switch off, and when we need to actually take that break, so that we don't get overworked with everything.
Yes, I can relate entirely, as you probably know, and running also is a great place to be, and it's good if people do have it and have that in their routine in their life. Somehow bring it into the structure. I think it's really important. So I think it's fair to say, Chris, that you've experienced some success, and it's wonderful to see. I really love that I've had the privilege of knowing you from 10 years ago, and then seeing this journey that's happened, and to bring your individuality, but to bring your honesty and that transparency, and to be that same person wherever you are. I think that was a very important thing, that you said, just in when talking about leadership. You don't have a person that goes in the workplace and a person that goes at home, and you have this honesty. We talked about communication and being able to communicate honestly with people around performance, and I mean, these are really great messages. You must have some secrets to the success. Is there anything on that you can share with us? I just have one thing after this, but yeah, please.
So I think, what I'd probably like to look at maybe to have a successful career in luxury. I can share what I see as 3 secrets, which I call the 3 Ps. And this isn't my idea. It's actually, again, someone who once mentioned these to me, and I've adapted it to myself. But the 3 Ps, as I see them, are passion, patience, and perseverance. I think the first, if you start with passion, especially, this doesn't necessarily just mean luxury retail. I guess this could be anything in life. But the passion you need to show in everything you do. Because if you're not passionate about it, then really, don't bother. It's like, you have to have that passion. You have to love the brand. You have to love the product that you're showing clients. And again, in luxury retail, you have to have the passion for the customer. So you actually asked about what do I look for when I'm interviewing, and actually I look for that passion. Yes. I look for the passion in what they do. And the reason I ask the question sometimes in an interview is about, talk to me about something not on your CV or about an interest. Because if they have a passion for an interest, and then you can see that their passion relates to whether it be the brand, the product, the customer, you can identify that passion. Mm-hmm. The second one for me is patience. And I'll refer patience to good things take time. So an haute couture dress, if you want to have an haute couture dress, that can take up to 4 months to go from the initial stage to actually being fulfilled. And that takes time. And that's, for me, it's, an haute couture dress is where Christian Dior started, showcasing in 1947. In February, he showcased, haute couture dresses. Ready to wear didn't exist then. So you couldn't just pick up a piece off the peg, so to speak, off the shelf and take it to the till. So it was only made to order. And haute couture is made particularly for you. It fits, it's made by hand to fit your body type. A bust form's made, and then the dress is built around that. And good things take time, as I said. So it could take up to 4 months to have that haute couture dress. So you need to have patience. And patience also for me is about, sometimes really ensuring that you work hard. You're not given things straight away. You need to sometimes wait until you're given an opportunity. And you need to be humble as well. And the third point for me is perseverance. So, things are not always going to go smoothly. We've seen that in the world this year. So, sometimes with perseverance, you have to keep going. You know that there's going to be tough days, and sometimes the goalposts change, or the rules of work change, or whatever it be. And actually, you need to understand, if things have changed, and the global pandemic is a good one. I would love things to be the way they were a year ago, but I can't control that. So what I need to do is I need to understand, things have changed. What do I need to do? How do I need to adapt to fit this new environment? Because I can't change this environment. And there's no point for me, the way I see it, is dwelling on the past. It's like, things have changed. It happens. Let's move forward. And actually that perseverance is to have that vision and that goal, and that, you know, sometimes you need to change your goals slightly, but actually that vision won't change too much.
Yes.
So that's where I see the passion, patience, and perseverance.
Yes, and again, wonderful lessons, and I agree with you. Well, I've always said persistence and determination, and to have a very clear vision myself. So I think that's a fantastic thing. I just also at the end of this wanted to ask you, and it's probably not an easy question, and you've just touched on it briefly because we're sort of coming to the end, I think, of our time, but what do you see as the future for fashion? I think there's people watching who, you know, they're starting out. We've had you come in as a lecturer wonderfully in our fashion and global brand management degree, Bachelor of Business at ICMS. And I know that it created an enormous amount of interest and engagement. So we're hugely grateful to you for what you've added there. But these people are the future, and these young people that are coming into this degree and this education, they literally are the future. So my last question really is, what is the future in your opinion?
Sure. I think before I answer that question, I will reference, you talked about the series of guest lectures I've done with ICMS,
yes,
with first year students straight out of school. And actually, one of the real, I guess, you asked me what the tip for success, and actually the education is vital. What those students are learning at the moment and the experience that they're getting is second to none. Mm-hmm. And although, you know, a lot of it's now done in a virtual world, that experience is something which, if I had my time again, I would love to have been able to get that step ahead by, having the content and the richness of that content that they're doing, and getting involved, and they have guest lectures from different people from different industries and learning from that. And that's something, 20 years ago, I didn't exist. I never had the opportunity to do that. And it's something which, a little bit of a tip there is actually, what they can gain out of that. And maybe even at the time they won't realize. Some of my best learning exercises, actually, I only realized 5 years later how much I learned from that experience. So I think that firstly, that's incredible. What's the future for fashion, the future for retail? I guess, again, we don't know in this world what's going to happen next. But for me, what I see in luxury retail is it's moving much more to a local client. We're not resilient. We have to be resilient because we can't be reliant on one client type. We have to really focus much more local. For brands, I see it, innovation is key. How do we adapt to the new world? How do we operate in there? And I think the other important point is sustainability, because I think what we've seen over the lockdown periods is actually we've seen, there's not been as many aeroplanes in the sky or cars on the road. And actually, I think the realization of sustainability and moving to a much greener world has become more of a reality than probably it was before. And it's vital. And luxury fashion plays an important part in that sustainability. So for me, there are brands, and I won't name them, but there are brands who produce hundreds of, probably not even 100,000, probably millions of garments a year, of which, a large percentage end up in land waste at the end of the year. It's what some people class as throwaway fashion. They buy something, it's relatively inexpensive, they wear it once, they throw it away.
Yes.
Where luxury plays an important part is, luxury brands, these pieces are made by artisans. They're made by, original family members of the maison. They've put hours of, handwork into it, into embroidery into it, embellishment into it. They are pieces of art. And actually, a majority of them are timeless, and they're pieces that, you will be able to wear over and over again. And they're an investment. So, you would hope that actually within luxury brands that those pieces will never end up in landfill. And that they are pieces which people care about. And again, the sourcing of materials has become more important, and that it doesn't have many air miles. So if pieces are made in Italy, then start to finish made in Italy, and then sent to the consumer. So I think you'll see a lot more now about sustainability, and I hope we do, than we've ever seen before.
Yes, I hope so too. I agree with you. I think that, the situation that you're in Dior gives you a great space or place to be able to take a lead there too. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Well, that was my last question, and we're very, very grateful, Chris. We love you here at ICMS. We really appreciate your involvement, and the students have got such a lot out of it. Just hearing the real story, you've come from amazing, a very humble and background, and you've really journeyed so well, and I really appreciate the honesty that you've shared and just how genuine that you are as a person, and look at where you are today. And I hope that anyone that's here tonight that's been able to watch and listen has the opportunity one day of actually meeting Chris, because it is fantastic. So, and you've done such a lot, and what you give back is incredible. So really grateful for that too, what you're contributing back. That is phenomenal. So thank you especially to you, Chris Watney. Thank you very, very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas to you and family, and to the Dior family there at in London.
Yeah, so well, we hope to see you soon once the world returns to normal. And to everyone who's joined tonight, thank you for joining, and I wish everyone, stay safe, take care, and I hope to meet all of you one day in person.
Indeed. Thank you everyone for coming along tonight. We're very grateful, and reach out if you've got any questions. This has been recorded. You can see it on YouTube, I believe. So and hopefully, Chris, we're going to invite you to come back next year. I hope you'll agree, but we can chat later. So Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you. Bye for now.